Evening, Chris. Thank you, my friends. And polls are closing in Nebraska. Thank you at home for joining us this hour. Happy Tuesday. One of the things that happens if you run for president but you don't win is that when you come back to your old job, sometimes people clap for you. That's what happened after Marco Rubio dropped out of the race for president and returned to his seat in the Senate. That is also what happened today to Ted Cruz, who was spotted by a reporter from Roll Call today getting out of a car on Capitol Hill to go back to his day job. The car, incidentally, was very, very, very badly parked. We have that picture? We don't have that picture. But you know what? There we go. Thank you. Look, can we drop the, so you can see how the car is parked there? Yeah, awesome. But you know what? He's Ted Cruz. That's how he rolls. That's how he parks. And he may not have won his race for the Republican presidential nomination, but today he came back to his old job in the Senate, and then his staff did clap for him when he finally went back into his office. Before that nice moment, though, Senator Cruz also made time this morning to do an interview on right-wing talk radio, in which he kind of, sort of, but not really suggested that maybe he still is running for president. Maybe he'll get back in.
Ted, are you leaving the door open to if Nebraska were to somehow
it's not going to happen,
miraculously choose you tonight?
Pat's going for the Hail Mary.
Is there, I mean, if that happened, would you consider getting back in the race?
Well, I am not holding my breath. My assumption is that that will not happen. But listen, let's be very clear. If there is a path to victory, we launched this campaign intending to win. The reason we suspended the race last week is with Indiana's loss, I didn't see a viable path to victory. If that changes, we will certainly respond accordingly.
I don't know about you, Nebraska, but I take that as a yes.
I take that as a big yes.
Get to the polls now. Vote for Ted.
I want you to know.
You guys, Ted Cruz might unsuspend. He might get back into the race. Actually, no, he's definitely not. Polls are now closed all across the great state of Nebraska. NBC News has projected that the winner of the winner-take-all Nebraska Republican primary, no surprise, is Donald Trump, the last remaining Republican candidate in the Republican primary. Nebraska has 36 delegates on the Republican side. This is a winner-take-all contest. Donald Trump will get all of those delegates. Earlier this evening, Donald Trump was also projected to be the winner of the West Virginia Republican primary. Again, no surprise, he is the last remaining Republican in the Republican primary. Interestingly, though, tonight, at the same time that NBC News was able to project that win for Donald Trump in West Virginia, NBC was also able to project this win for Bernie Sanders in the great state of West Virginia. And on the Democratic side of the race, there are still two candidates. There is more than one person still running. There is still a race there. We're going to be talking about the implications of that West Virginia win for Sanders and the rest of the race going forward in some detail tonight, including with some very elaborate math. We've got that coming up in the next few minutes here on this show. But in West Virginia, it's interesting. West Virginia today, they voted on both sides, Democratic and Republican side. And West Virginia today had kind of a monster ballot. And that's in part because you weren't just voting for your presidential candidate in West Virginia. You had to vote by name for individual delegates. You have to pick a whole roster of presidential delegates in West Virginia. More than 200 people were running to be Republican convention delegates alone today. But 22 of them will be picked. Most, if not all of them, will be pledged to support Donald Trump. And we'll be watching these races tonight to get the final exact tally in terms of the margin of victory. But even from this point, it's fairly easy to tell that Mr. Trump has just won these two states tonight by margins that you would expect in a race that is over, because the Republican presidential primary is over. That little joking discussion by Ted Cruz that he might get back in the race today, it was a joke. It's over. The only open question in the Republican primary, which actually may be settled tonight, is whether or not Donald Trump is going to break the record for the most votes ever received by anyone in a Republican presidential primary season. Donald Trump has already easily surpassed every other recent Republican presidential nominee in terms of the number of votes he has received this year. He's surpassed everybody, including the last two Republican nominees, Mitt Romney and John McCain. The only question tonight is whether tonight's going to be the night that Donald Trump beats the all-time record for votes in a Republican primary. The all-time record is held by George W. Bush from the Republican primary that was held in the year 2000. Heading into tonight, Mr. Trump was a little under 200,000 votes shy of George W. Bush's all-time vote record. So we'll be watching the total vote tallies in both Nebraska and West Virginia tonight. We'll also be watching just the overall voter turnout to see what it's like. I mean, you expect voter turnout to drop once a race is effectively over, once a person's vote at the presidential level no longer helps decide some competitive presidential contest. But it's interesting. I mean, heading into West Virginia in particular, and less so in Nebraska, local officials said today that they were still expecting a lot of people, if not a record number of people, to turn out. So if turnout is sufficiently high, Donald Trump will become the new all-time record holder in American history in terms of most votes ever cast for anyone running for president in a Republican primary. But remember, the Beltway press still insists that the Republican Party is not psyched at all about Donald Trump as their nominee, right? The Beltway narrative is that Republicans don't have enthusiasm for him. They are deeply conflicted about the possibility of him being their nominee. While meanwhile, in the real world, he really is racking up more votes than any other Republican candidate has ever had in a Republican primary ever. But the Beltway narrative insists that the Trump nomination is causing, huge division in that party. Beltway keeps insisting that there is an important and influential cadre of noble, if not heroic, resistance to Mr. Trump becoming the leader of that esteemed party. Well, here's today's latest data on the supposedly principled resistance to Donald Trump among influential Republicans. Take it away, Senator.
Well, I've signed a pledge that said I'd support the Republican nominee, and I intend to continue to do that. I intend to live up to the pledge that we made.
But it's not just concerns that you've had about him. You once said that you didn't think it was, that you had concerns about the fact, about the nuclear codes being in the hands of an erratic con man. That was what you said.
Well, so I'm not going to, here's what I'm not going to do over the next 6 months is sit there and just be taking shots at him. I stand by the things that I said. But I'm not going to sit here now and become his chief critic over the next 6 months.
I stand by my assessment that he is an erratic con man who should never be given access to the nuclear codes, and I will also support him for president. That is how the Republican Party is taking their principled stand against Donald Trump. I mean, I guess to be clear, the principle at work here is it's better to give the nuclear launch codes to an erratic con man than it is to not vote Republican. Like, think about what they're saying. Like, you're in a voting booth, and some sort of terrorist came in and said, vote for a Democrat, or I will give the nuclear launch codes to an erratic con man. You would say, okay, give the nuclear launch codes to an erratic con man. That's better than voting for a Democrat. That's the principled stand that we're getting from Republican leaders, including today Marco Rubio. The last race on the Republican side will be June 7th, when 5 states vote in the Republican primary, including the biggest one, California. Last night, the California Secretary of State released the list of delegates that have been formally assigned to each campaign. The Donald Trump list of delegates made headlines this afternoon when Mother Jones was first to report that the Trump-named delegate slate, which was officially approved by the Trump campaign, published by the California Secretary of State, the Trump delegate list includes this guy.
The American National Super PAC makes this call to support Donald Trump. I am William Johnson, a farmer and white nationalist. The white race is dying out in America and Europe because we are afraid to be called racist. Few schools anymore have beautiful white children as a majority. Gradual genocide against the white race. Donald Trump is not a racist, but Donald Trump is not afraid. Don't vote for a Cuban, vote for Donald Trump.
The white race is being replaced by other peoples in America and in all white countries. Donald Trump stands strong as a nationalist. The American National Super PAC makes this call in support of Donald Trump. My name is William Johnson. I am a farmer and a white nationalist.
And now, William Johnson, farmer and white nationalist, who has run those white supremacist robocalls supporting Donald Trump in at least 7 states during the Republican primary. That guy who voices those ads, who paid for those ads, gave out his cell phone number in those ads, this self-proclaimed white nationalist who runs the American Freedom Party, who's been working his white supremacist guts out for Donald Trump for months now. he has just been named an official delegate for the Donald Trump campaign in the great state of California. Josh Harkinson at Mother Jones reports today that Mr. Johnson submitted his name to the Trump campaign several months ago for consideration to become a delegate. Mr. Harkinson reports that this white supremacist guy submitted at least one of those overtly racist robocalls as part of his application to be a delegate to the Trump campaign. And the Trump campaign presumably reviewed all of these applications, and they picked him. And we know that because when they decided to name him to their official slate of delegates for the state, they sent him a congratulatory email directly from the Donald Trump campaign. Josh Harkinson interviewed William Johnson about his enthusiasm for Trump and how the Trump campaign fits into his life's work, which he is, sees as the goal of his life is deporting all non-white people from this country and making America an all-white, pure Aryan nation. That's the work of his life. And William Johnson is now exalting publicly over how Donald Trump and Donald Trump's success in the Republican Party has made things so much better and so much easier for professional racists and white supremacists like him. Quote, "For many, many years, when I would say these things, other white people would call me names. Oh, you're a hate monger. You're a Nazi. You're like Hitler. Now they come and say, oh, you're like Donald Trump." After the Trump campaign congratulated William Johnson, farmer and white nationalist, on being selected as an official Trump delegate, after the California Secretary of State published his name as an official Trump delegate, after Mother Jones published this remarkable piece today pointing out that Donald Trump just named as one of his delegates the white nationalist robocall guy from the primaries, after all of that, late today, the Trump campaign decided to rescind their offer to William Johnson, farmer and white nationalist. They're attributing the whole thing to what they're calling a database error.